had a snake for a few weeks now, and his name is Severus. He's in Severus Snake. And there are some things that you need to know when you're deciding what pet to get. Most people assume that if you're going to get a pet, it's going to be a cat or a dog, but snakes and frogs can actually be quite fun as well. And so some of the things that you need to know before actually purchasing a snake are that they are a big commitment. They can live for 20 plus years, so it's not something that you get and, oh, I'm tired of it, a few years later, it'll die. No. Also, you need to handle them on a semi-regular basis. I mean, you don't want to just put your hand in their container when you're feeding them, or else if you try to pet them, they're going to think you're feeding them and maybe try to eat you. But you need to play with them regularly, or they could get hostile and get frightened easily when other people might want to come and play with them. And in order to keep them comfortable, you need to make sure that their tank or cage, whatever container you keep them in, looks like their natural environment. If they're used to cold climates, if you have them like a palm tree under a heat lamp all the time, they're not going to be comfortable, and then that'll just cause so many problems that you just want to keep it as natural to their main environment as possible. They are quite the little escape artists, so you need to make sure that the container lid is secure and that there aren't any little nooks that they can sneak out of, and if they do escape, you need to make sure that you go search for the worm covered spaces, because that's going to be the first place they most likely go to. Hydration is so important, especially in Texas where it is hot all the time. You need to make sure that they constantly have a full water dish, and if they need to have it humid, you need to make sure you spray water in there to keep them nice and comfortable all the time. Feeding is a big problem. If they are used to eating rats, you can't feed them like tiny pinky mice. You need to make sure that you feed them what they would find in the natural habitat out in the wild, or else it could be bad for their digestive system and problems. Now, when you actually choose the snake that you're going to have as a pet, you need to read up on the species ahead of time, because if you just want something that your kids can play with, you don't necessarily want a ball python, because they can get big and can possibly strangle children. But some of the good snakes to start out with are corn snakes or king snakes. I actually have a corn snake, and they don't get too big, which is also something important when you're looking at the species, because there's a varying size. I know the girl that I bought my snake from, she has ones that can grow 2 feet maybe, and then she has huge ones that just are really scary big. And breeders are also important. She's a friend of mine, and she's a professional. Her mom and she have done it for years now, and so I trusted her. And that's very important, because you shouldn't just go get a wild snake, and you shouldn't go someone who just has a bunch of snakes in a box in their garage, because that's not going to be good for the snake. They could have problems. If you go to a trusted breeder, then you're sort of assured that there will be a safer bet as a pet. And you also need to examine them, because even if the breeder is top quality and fabulous, if they have some sort of deformity or look sick, you don't want that pet, because it could be dangerous for people around it, or it could just die quickly, and that would be very sad. When it comes to food, you can do live feeding, or you can have pre-killed food. Typically, I find pre-killed food to be the best, and that's just where you go to Petco or wherever and get frozen food, and then you thaw it out and give it to them. But you can also give it a live rat, which can be dangerous because rats can scratch and fight before they are actually eaten, and that can cause infection, and it's not good in the long run. Now, for corn snakes, they are a more popular snake, so there's more information about them as a pet trade. And you typically need about a 20-gallon tank, and that way they can have a nice amount of leeway around, because you don't want them too cramped, or they will try their hardest to escape. And sometimes you need to put a heating pad underneath. In Texas, it's not as big of a problem, but in places where it's colder, you definitely need to have that heat because they can cool themselves down easier than they can warm themselves up. And they also sometimes like to have humidity. I think it's about 50% is what you should keep the humidity level at for them. And for my specific snake, for feeding purposes, what you do is you heat up water and then you put the pinky inside it to thaw it out, and then you feed it to them. About once a week is what you're supposed to do when they're smaller, and then eventually you move up in size and regularity. So, anybody have any questions about snakes or? Okay. Well, thank you for listening.
Hi folks, my name is Catherine Pauls, I'm the branch manager.
Yes, ma'am.
And to use a meeting room, you have
Yes.
scheduled it, and also to
Mhm.
videotape inside
Yes.
the library.